Good morning. We begin with a reading from Luke chapter 24, verses 13 to 35. That same day, 2 of Jesus' followers were walking to the village of Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things, Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them, but God kept them from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing so intently as you walk along?" They stopped short, sadness written across their faces. Then one of them, Cleopas, replied, "You must be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about these things that have happened here in the last few days." "What things?" Jesus asked. "The things that happened to Jesus, the man from Nazareth," they said. "He was a prophet who did powerful miracles, and he was a mighty teacher in the eyes of God and all the people. But our leading priests and other religious leaders handed him over to be condemned to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped that he was the Messiah who had come to rescue Israel, and this all happened 3 days ago." And then some women from our group of followers were at his tomb early this morning, and they came back with an amazing report. They said that his body was missing, and that they had seen angels who had told them that Jesus is alive. Some of our men ran out to see, and sure enough, his body was gone, just as the women had said. Then Jesus said to them, "You foolish people, you find it so hard to believe all the prophets wrote in the Scriptures. Wasn't it clearly predicted that the Messiah would have to suffer all these things before entering his glory?" And then Jesus took them through the writings of Moses and all the prophets, explaining from all the Scriptures the things concerning himself. By this time they were nearing Emmaus. At the end of their journey, Jesus acted as if he was going on, but they begged him, "Stay the night with us, since it's getting so late." So they went home with him, and as they sat down to eat, he took the bread, blessed it, then he broke it and gave it to them. And suddenly their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and at that moment he disappeared. They said to each other, "Didn't our hearts burn within us as he talked with us on the road and explained the Scriptures to us?" And within the hour they were on their way back to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 disciples and the others who had gathered with them, who said, "The Lord has really risen. He appeared to Peter." Then the 2 from Emmaus told their story of how God had appeared to them as they were walking along the road, and how they had recognized him as he was breaking the bread. And then a New Testament lesson from Acts, chapter 2, verses 42 to 47. All of the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. And a deep sense of awe came over all of them, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity. All of this while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. Well, once again, I say good morning to each and every one of you. I did write a sermon this morning, but as I got up here, there appears to be a sermon from last week as well, so I have options between. So if I'm halfway through and you'd like me to switch back to what you had, just raise your hand, I guess, and I can jump between. I do feel, as I wrote this sermon, though, that perhaps I'm preaching to the choir, or I guess I'd have to turn around to preach to the choir here. But I do just have to say thank you first and foremost for the mission energy that the Borough Mission has experienced from Home Moravian Church. In addition to gifts and financial gifts to help support our ministry, I had the pleasure of being with the group from Home Moravian Church at Mission Camp this past summer, and what a joy that was. And I wish I could just show you pictures and videos of them hard at work on mission sites, and that could be as powerful a sermon as anything I'll offer here today. I also had the joy of being with them the last 2 years at senior high camp as I've given program there. And so first and foremost, as I get a chance to share about mission work of the Board of World Mission, specifically for the ways that my life has been enriched by the youth of this congregation in those settings. I thank you for the support and encouragement and just any advocacy I can give to continue to support that work of those youth as they become leaders in the mission work of our church as well. So before Christmas, and I know it's decidedly after Christmas now, and if you hadn't already put your Christmas tree out on the street to be picked up by the city, you have to wait until next year, or I guess it's planted in your yard. That happened quickly. But I was thinking about when I was setting up the Christmas tree, in my family, it was always tradition just to either play Christmas music or have a favorite Christmas movie on. And this year, my wife and I had put on the Peanuts Christmas story that had been on, Charlie Brown Christmas. And we were watching that as we put up the tree. And after that one finished, and I love Linus explaining, the reason for Christmas is a part of that, but another Peanuts Christmas special that I didn't know existed came on after. And there was a line here that I think is worth saying. So Lucy and Charlie Brown are talking. Lucy, of course, of fame for maybe not always treating Charlie Brown the best, right? Like, hey, you want to play football, Charlie Brown? And she'll set up the football, and when Charlie Brown comes to kick it, what does she do? She yanks it away, and he falls on his head, right? But Christmas is the time to be nice to one another, right? So it's a Christmas special. It's a feel-good thing. So Lucy turns to Charlie Brown and says, "Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown. At this time of year, I think that we should put aside all of our differences and be nice to one another." And Charlie Brown, in true Charlie Brown fashion, looks at her and says, "Well, why does it just have to be for this time of year? Couldn't we be nice to each other all year round?" And Lucy says, "What are you, some kind of fanatic?" Will you join me for just a moment of prayer? Dear God, we thank you just for the opportunity it is to share your word and your message. And what a joy it is to take part in your mission. It's your mission, Lord, and each one of us has a part in it, but it is one mission that we serve together to grow your church, your spirit, and your community in the world. So we ask, Lord, that we take this time and this hour in worship together to rekindle the passion that we have, to celebrate the work that's been done, and to strengthen us for the work yet to come. For we know that your word cannot be contained within these walls or this place as you call us to all the world. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. So speaking of Christmas, have you ever been part of the debate that comes up of when you can start playing Christmas music, right? Is it the day after Thanksgiving? Is it December 1st? When do you have to take the tree down? How long can you leave the lights up? Well, it's an interesting thing as we think about the time frame for Christmas, and I saw some signs, and I've seen them several times at Christmas and saw them again this year, that said, "Keep Christ in Christmas." And I have to say that I'm not a huge fan of those signs, and not because, yes, I absolutely believe that Christ is the reason for the season and should be an integral part of that, but I don't think we want to use the words "keep Christ in Christmas" because it could send the message that that's where we're supposed to contain Christ, just within that season or just within that time. I think that Christ calls us to a mission that's so much bigger than 4 weeks of the year or just even that amount of time or the space where we are. Christ calls us to a mission that is for all the world. And you may not be surprised to hear me advocate for a mission that is supposed to reach all the world, as I am the executive director of the Board of World Mission of the Moravian Church in North America. So as we sit this morning in a church in the southern province of the Moravian Church in North America, we recognize that we're one of 24 unity provinces around the world. In addition to 24 unity provinces, there are 4 mission provinces, 2 unity undertakings, and 15 new mission areas. I'm not going to take the time to list them all for you this morning, but in all of those different places, there's more than 1 million Moravians in the world today. To give a little bit of perspective, about 5% live in North America, and less than 2% of all the Moravians in the world live here in the southern province. And I say that to get to this point. We may feel that we know a lot of Moravians and a lot of familiar faces when we get together at synods or other gatherings. And we may think it's a small Moravian world after all. But in reality, we are just one part of a big thing that God is doing around the world and through the Moravian Church worldwide. Having world in the name, the Border World Mission may be known best for the work that we do around the world. And we are a primary way that our congregations, such as Home Moravian, connect with partners around the world as we help support and encourage these relationships. We have partner provinces that include the Moravian churches in Costa Rica, Eastern West Indies, Guyana, Honduras, Labrador, Nicaragua, and Western Tanzania. We also have responsibilities to help grow and support newer mission areas. And these include Peru and Sierra Leone as mission areas, and also the brand new mission province in Cuba. Each of these areas are defined by their stage of development, and the Border World Mission helps these areas grow from mission areas to mission provinces to full unity provinces like the Southern Province, so that they can continue to grow their ministry and outreach and continue their mission as well. And as I mentioned, Cuba has now become a mission province, and I know there was a team from this congregation that was there last fall and built connections with the church there. And so some of you may already know that the church in Cuba held its first synod as a mission province last fall and elected the Reverend Armando Recindo to be the first Moravian bishop in Cuba. And he holds the title as of this morning of the newest Moravian bishop, as he was consecrated just last night in Havana, Cuba. And one of the consecrating bishops was our own Sam Gray, also who works for the Board of World Mission. And we give thanks and blessing for just the signs of encouragement and growth and life of that new area as well. So we can't, and we shouldn't try to contain Christ in the Christmas season alone. We wouldn't be able to contain it there. And we cannot keep the ideas and actions of mission contained solely in mission trips either, taken maybe once a year. Because this is something big that God has invited us into. And I'm talking about just the work of the Border World Mission today, and I won't have time to mention even just within home church, the work that you all are doing with the family-to-family connections with the church in Albania, the other works of the Moravian church as well, like the Unity Women's Desk and other congregational efforts as well. So as I represent the Border World Mission, know that this is just a piece of the amazing work going on in a Moravian church worldwide. So to have grown this big, to have this large of an impact in the world, I feel very grateful this morning for the many people who have come before me and before each and every one of us. Because we can go back from one generation to the next, from one person to the next, tracing the gospel message and the way that it's been able to stick around. And not just for 4 weeks between Christmas and Thanksgiving, but for thousands of years. Years when we can trace it all the way back to the gospel lesson that we have today from Luke. When we have the story there, we pick up with two followers of Christ walking away from Jerusalem. As the story starts, can you imagine how they must have been feeling? They had dropped everything to follow Jesus. They had left families, careers. They thought they had found the real deal. But just like that, it was over. Jesus, their leader, had been killed, and so dejectedly they're walking away from Jerusalem going home. Everything that had happened had been too much for them. They're too overwhelmed, and they can't see a way forward. Now, this is where we get the benefit of having the whole book, and we know there's 23 books of the New Testament that come after the Gospels, so we know that the story does not end there. And so when these disciples walk, they're joined by a stranger on the road. And we read that this stranger, who we know is Jesus, takes them on a verse-by-verse walk through the Scriptures, explaining how it all connects and how Jesus was indeed the Messiah they had hoped for. Now, if you're like me, it is one of my favorite stories of how Jesus walks with the individuals and helps share the story and the point of the message and joining with them. But I have to admit, for all the things that are in the Bible, this is the one piece that I wish was also included. I would love to hear what Jesus said, the word-by-word walk through the Scriptures of saying, here it is, this is how it all fits together. And wouldn't that be wonderful for us? And wouldn't that be helpful as we're trying to share the gospel? So let me give you an example. When I meet with mission teams and from congregations to do mission training before they go, a question I always ask is, so why are you going on this mission trip and what's the point? And inevitably, I'll get the answer, and it's a good answer. They say, we're going to share the gospel. And I say, that's fantastic. Could you share some with me now? If you want to see deer in the headlights moments, you mean right now? No. And it's okay. I mean, I think that certainly the way we share the gospel is more than just words, and maybe that's why it's not listed there, so we don't think that that speech would be enough, that a fancy brochure printed out of here's the point and handed out. That we have more work to do. We have to be invested in the mission as well. We have to say, come and see how I witness through my actions and not just my words, that you'll see what the point of this whole mission movement is. So I think as we're called, we continue to look at the way that these disciples, maybe the words weren't enough for them either. Because even as Jesus explains everything to them, it's not until they sit down at the table where they share a meal together that they recognize that Christ is with them. It's all about living a Christ example, an act of Christ, the breaking of bread, the sharing of a meal together is how they recognize Christ in their midst. Basically, they had a Moravian love feast, sitting down together and sharing. After that moment, they're ready to be missionaries. They're up and they run back to Jerusalem to tell their friends about the good news. We jump ahead a little bit to Acts chapter 2, our second reading today, and it says that all those believed devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship and to the breaking of bread. So those who believed came together, devoted themselves to, among other things, the breaking of bread. Again, basically sharing a meal, sharing a time together, having essentially a Moravian love feast of the time. So immediately following this in Acts chapter 2, we see how this community grows, and we see that they shared their meals and broke bread together with great joy and generosity, all while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And from that, each day the Lord added to the fellowship those who were being saved. So how did we get here? How do we get to be more than 1 million Moravians around the world, from 11 disciples, from a small band of refugees given asylum on an estate in Germany, and from the first missionaries sent out in the 1730s? By being a community and following Christ's example through our actions, by sitting together, sharing together, and building meaningful relationships. And to me, that is mission. We won't be on track if the goal of a specific congregation is just to get people into church services with the sole purpose of teaching them how to invite other people to come to church services so that they, in turn, will bring others to church services. That, just by itself, is church attendance, right? And the church is not just about attending large gatherings. Church is so much more. Church is people. People who live as a certain way in the world. Mission is not about making large gatherings of people, though that may be a result. Mission is about living a certain way, putting on such an example that people want to come and see what's going on. And as we read in Acts, it's then God who will add to our numbers. So the present and future of our church and the Moravian denomination can't just be about its history. It can't be about a Christ who lived in the past. It has to be about a living presence of God in our community and a living presence lived out through our actions. Last August, I had the privilege to travel to one of the newer missionaries in the Moravian church in Haiti. And I had spent the week going around and seeing the growing church there, and we had gotten about $8,000 in donations to go help with, after Hurricane Matthew in 2016, the damage that had happened there. But as we went around, we recognized that really the damage was still from the earthquake in 2010 that had devastated this island nation. And as the church was growing, we could see that they needed to have a chance to be in the growing community, how they'd been separated out and from together. They were looking for the Moravian church as a way to be a connection between them. And so on the Sunday morning, we got a chance to worship in the congregation on the top floor of this building with a makeshift roof. And the reason it was a makeshift roof is this had not always been the top floor of that building. During the earthquake in 2010, floors 4 and 5 of this building had been reduced to rubble and had caved in. A few of the members, including one little girl who was there, she was about 12 when I was there in August, had actually been about 5 and had been trapped for over 15 hours in the rubble of that church on that day. She'd been freed by other church members, including some family members who had dug for hours, and finally freed after some others had come with shovels and other tools to get at things they couldn't pull away the rubble with their hands. So as I shared that morning, it happened to be the 290th anniversary of the first Moravian Love Feast, so it was August 13th. And I can't tell you how powerful it was to be able to help lead worship that morning, and also to be able to talk about and then lead the first Moravian Love Feast that we know of ever had on the island of Haiti, in the nation there. How powerful it was to be amongst a community that I didn't really have to teach about community, considering there were members there who literally owed their lives to one another. They understood this, but now had a Moravian tradition that helped them celebrate the sense of community that we see in the book of Acts, that we hear time and again from our history, and will continue to be a part of their tradition now as they grow together. In November, I had the privilege to attend the Unity Mission Conference in Cape Town, South Africa. And in my job, I now get the opportunity to, of course, speak about the Moravian unity and give numbers like 24 unity provinces. But how different it is to be able to experience that in person and to build relationships and connect. We had Moravians from more than 35 countries. We celebrated worship, prayer, read scripture in more than a dozen languages. And if being together just in that way wasn't enough, I got to visit one of the earlier Moravian mission stations in a town called Genadendal. Translated from Afrikaans, this means Valley of Mercy or Valley of Grace. And it was here that the Moravian missionaries started a mission with an indigenous group of folks called the Khoi Khoi. As the mission grew, the missionary at that time was actually kicked out by the Dutch colonial government because it didn't kind of match with their way of doing government and doing church as they worshiped together. About 50 years later, some different Moravian missionaries, feeling called back to that place to restart the mission, to say, we think that we should restart a church in this place. We're sorry that that had to end. When they arrived, they found that not only had the church continued, but it had grown in that community. The message had been bigger than just the one messenger and the missionary. It had enveloped that community, and they had grown together and continued on without the missionary present. So in fact, this community continued to be a shining example of Christianity even through the apartheid era in South Africa. And they were valuing people for more than the color of their skin in this Moravian community. And the witness gained even more prominence when Nelson Mandela, president after the apartheid era, visited, learned about this history, and was so moved that he changed the name of his home near Cape Town to Genadendal as well, as a reminder of the spirit that enveloped this community that should be reached out to the people of South Africa as a way of an example of community in a place hurting from years of discrimination. So today, as we celebrate Moravian mission work, we're celebrating the work that has been done, but also hopefully discerning the ways that we can continue to further the mission in the future. So the Board of World Mission has broken down our plans for 2018 and beyond into mission outreach and mission engagement. Mission outreach being the ways that we guide and support and finance the ministries of our partners outside of the congregations in the provinces that make up the Board of World Mission. And mission engagement is the way we support members of congregations here as they discern how and then share their gifts in mission. So when the Board of World Mission sends funding for infant nutrition program across several communities in Honduras, this being a preventative measure to reduce the number of children coming into our clinic to be treated for malnutrition, that is mission outreach. When the Board of World Mission provides grants to support growing ministries and helps our partners establish sustainable business ideas, like there's a now Moravian Bubbles laundromat and an English academy in Lima, Peru, those are examples of mission outreach. When the Board of World Mission sends seminary professors to mission areas to teach new Moravian pastors about our community, and we promote leadership development in growing churches, that is mission outreach. Mission engagement is when the Board of World Mission gathers young adults from across the northern and southern provinces, as we have done the past few years, to provide encouragement and training for them to live out the mission that they're feeling called to and to share their gifts with the church. Mission engagement is when some of those young adults then take the initiative to go and travel to places like Nepal and teach at the Moravian school. Mission engagement is when the Board of World Mission finds itself overwhelmed, trying to respond to the devastation caused by hurricane after hurricane, but members of our congregation step up and meet the many needs. It's when people respond to these disasters generously, with financial gifts or to other ways to support the rebuilding work. It's when a volunteer named Aaron drives an MDR trailer full of tools down to Texas for the rebuilding effort, sees some of the homes in damage, is so moved by it that he goes back for 4 weeks last fall and is now back for 8 more weeks to invite and coordinate our Moravian mission efforts in partnership with the Unity of the Brethren congregations there. So it seems, with that example, to be a perfect time to mention that mission engagement is also when the Board of World Mission makes direct invitations to individuals in our congregations, and they can have a chance to respond, to donate, to volunteer. So I'll share just a few more details in Sunday school after service, but I think it's appropriate to share a little bit about the work of Moravian disaster response ongoing with the Board of World Mission. So as I mentioned, Aaron is in Port Arthur, Texas, and we're partnering with Good Shepherd Moravian Church. And you may be saying, we don't have a Moravian church in Texas. And no, we don't. But it's a Unity of the Brethren congregation with a Moravian name because it was founded by Moravians who were political refugees during the Civil War in the 1980s and had moved to Texas and wanted to have a Moravian worshiping community there. So you can imagine the sense of community they feel now when Moravians from North Carolina, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and North Dakota have shown up to help rebuild the damaged church there and so many flooded homes. If you want to join or lead a work team, there is a need, and we have housing that's set up for you, which includes an RV, which was donated to the Board of World Mission just for that purpose. The other area of MDR work at this moment is in the Virgin Islands, part of the eastern West Indies province. Damage was done to so many homes and congregations and church properties there, including on the islands of St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John. Our first cleanup team will be on the ground starting February 6th, and they're going to help clear out some of the rubble around the Emmaus congregation on St. John's. And shortly after, we're sending in the Board of World Mission will be engineers to assess the structural viability and kind of plan out what will be the next stages of rebuilding in this area. We'll need lots of people to help with these efforts, including the school on St. Thomas. The students now are taking part in classes in a building that is pretty heavily damaged, but as soon as school is out for the summer, we hope to line up team after team to have the school back and completely repaired by the time they go back in the fall. So with that, I do want to thank Home Church and the members here who contribute to the Board of World Mission and Moravian disaster response. And I think it's worth noting that all of the donations that had come in up to last week designated for the work in Texas for Hurricane Harvey or for Irma and Maria in the Virgin Islands has already been sent on and is being used now. We didn't hold on to it. We wanted to make sure that it was put to use quickly for the immediate needs that are going on there. And we'll continue to do that with donations that come in. And we're also going to be allocating undesignated funds to help with the purchase of tools and supporting of teams that look to travel and go, as we're committed to the long-term rebuilding of these efforts, especially with our Moravian partners in the eastern West Indies. So as I finish, I want to say that I didn't come here to give a commercial about the Board of World Mission. I hope it's just evident that I believe deeply and I'm passionate about this work, and I think that it's a story that needs to be told. This is just a portion of the amazing work being done. And I certainly believe that it's important to speak in settings like this because I don't believe that it's work that can be done by one person. I would never want to try and take it on myself. And I certainly don't believe that 1 million members around the world is enough either. I think this is something that's going to require all of us, and that's all of us in this room, and it's going to be many people who may not be in this room today. But we're all called to achieve the mission that Christ is laying before us. In the Czech Republic, I visited a congregation who told me that their worship time each Sunday was a bit of singing, a biblical reflection, and then reports on the way the members had seen God present in the many outreach ministries they had going on nearly every day of the week. So Sunday, they had so much to report that they had to change their worship services. They had the biblical reflection, they had a time of singing, but the real message was, here's how we see God in the actions that we're taking each and every day. And I found that to just be truly amazing. So maybe we need to be just a bit more open to the ideas put forth by Charlie Brown in that Christmas special. So maybe serving in mission is something we can do more than 1 week in a far-off place. Maybe service becomes the overflow of a life filled with love and devotion. So if you've ever talked to anyone recently returned from a mission trip, you might call them excited. You might call them energized. Or if you were Lucy, you might even call them a fanatic. But in that case, maybe the ongoing energy is just what the world needs. And maybe, just maybe, that passion and that energy will become contagious. And maybe from that, all the Lucys in our lives will want to join us in this work too. Amen.